This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments onto whatever platform you happen to be watching on. And if you're watching live, they will show up here in my chat room and we can talk directly. And over the course of this last weekend, we at Corellian TV have been bringing you lots of materials regarding the lustration of the ancestors, which occurred here in Danville this weekend. We had a number of live streams. We did 2 episodes of Midday, um, and lots of photos showing up on various pages. So you've probably had lots of lustration material to enjoy, but I'm going to talk about it one more time today. And we've been leading up to it for a while. You know, the lustration of the ancestors is a very important thing for Corellians. It is not a ceremony you find in any other um, tradition that I'm aware of, certainly not in the way that we do it. And it is a ceremony of blessing. And hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. And it was good to see you this weekend. Um, it was a very important ceremony to us long before we started doing them publicly. We started to do public lustrations as the expansion of the tradition got larger and larger, and we wanted to share it with everyone. And hello to Janet in the chat room. And a lustration, uh, technically, a lustration is a blessing by lustral water, which is water which is blessed with light or with energy. And in this case, it is the blessing of the Corellian tradition and its members by the Corellian ancestors through the medium of lustral water. And the lustration of the ancestors happens once a year. It is a global event for Corellians that is spread out as far as we can spread it every year and involves as many people as wish to come. It happens in one location and often has online components as well. The lustration of the living happens in the Northern Hemisphere in the fall, and there are many of them. They're done as regional lustrations, and there are many lustrations of the living. This weekend was the lustration of the ancestors, but also the double investiture of the new first priesthood of the tradition. And it was a wonderful experience. I could not be happier with the experience. I feel very secure in the future of the tradition. And with Lord Phoenix and Lady Alyssa as the new first priesthood, I think that the tradition is in very good hands. And you know, as I remarked to them, and hello to Nikki in the chat room, they had a thing that I did not have. They had, for want of a better way to put it, a baptism by fire, because they came into the ascension of their roles in a time when there was quite a bit of dissension, which was not the case for me. But I feel they handled it beautifully. They quieted all the fires, and I think the tradition is as strong and as sound as it ever was. And I think this weekend really made that very clear. It was full of love, full of energy, and full of the pageantry that makes illustration. And hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee, and it was good to see you this weekend. And Janet says, the investiture was one of the most beautiful rituals I've ever attended. Thank you, Janet. It was beautiful. Now, if you were watching our live coverage, you will know that the one and only thing that really did not come off as planned was the live streaming of the investiture. But we had kind of been warned ahead of time that spiritually and energetically that might not come out as we hoped. I'm told, because I was leading the ceremony, I didn't know what happened, but I'm told that literally as soon as the ceremony began and I started talking, the camera went down because of the nature of the energy involved. And, you know, in a way, this was quite appropriate because it means that ceremony was private to those people who were present to watch it live. Now, we did get archival footage, which will come online soon, and so everyone will be able to see it, but only the people who actually came from it, who in many cases put out a great deal of time and effort to get there. They're the only ones who got to share it live. We had hoped to bring it live to everyone, but Spirit chose otherwise. Otherwise, I believe that our live streaming mostly went quite well. There were a couple of places where unexpected things happened. If you were watching, I believe on Friday, when Reverend Antonio brought the despachos to his interview, we lost our visual. The energy just affected the equipment as it does. The despachos were a very powerful energy, and they tended to affect technology anytime they were close to it. And if you're not familiar with despachos, it is a kind of offering. It is traditional in the investiture ceremony now. And two beautiful despachos were made, and they exuded great energy, and they were offered by the new first priesthood to the spirits of the ancestors and of the universe through the Vermilion River. The investiture ceremony took place. Um, we've been saying on the banks of the river. It was a little above the river, overlooking the river, and part of the ceremony was actually conducted in the river. It was absolutely beautiful. It was warmer than we expected for this time of year. But in Illinois, that's always a chance you're taking. But it was beautiful and very, very emotional, I think, for everyone involved. It was certainly an interesting moment for me, investing the new first priest and priestess while remaining one of the first priesthood retired from daily duties. Um, but for me, it was a chance to see what would have happened if I were no longer physically here, and to be able to help to see things go forward steadily. I look back at the last year, and all I can say is that the hand of spirit is very obvious in everything that occurred. Um, and had I actually died, I have no idea what might have happened. But as things have worked out, the right people came forward. They did the right things. There were the natural controversies that's always going to attend any change in administration. And they have resolved themselves for the tradition. Everything is stable and moving forward beautifully. And I could not be more delighted. And to see them, the new first priesthood, the new administration, be so stable and so loving in their energy was really wonderful for me. We also had my retirement party on Saturday night. We had, of course, the deeming ceremony. We had uh, the lustration ceremony itself, which did film and live stream with no problem. And it was really, I think, a very memorable experience. And the new first priesthood did something I don't think anyone has ever done previously. They did the oracle in tandem, and it was very interesting to watch that. And um, what was also interesting is another one of the first officers remarked to me that they were getting very much the same messages um, just before they came out of the mouths of the first priesthood in slightly different words, but that the oracle was going to many people at this particular lustration. And that's a wonderful thing. It was beautiful to watch. The offerings were wonderful. The smell of peonies was everywhere. And if you're not familiar with why I reference that, the peony is the heraldic flower of the High Corel family. And at this time in Illinois, they are in flower. and we had beautiful pink peonies, which are the ones my mother would have used. We had beautiful white peonies, beautiful yellow peonies. And we want to thank Reverend Antonio and Reverend Vicky for bringing many of those. We want to thank we want to thank Janet for bringing many of those. And they were so beautiful, and the smell for me was very nostalgic, and it was the best incense we could have asked for. The location was beautiful. Certainly one of the most beautiful locations we've had overall. Though we've had lustration in many very beautiful locations, and by the end of the weekend, we were totally exhausted, which is why you did not see me yesterday. Partly I was still meeting with people, but partly I was just not in a position to be doing a live telecast yesterday. I was a tired puppy. I think if you look at some of the photos from the end of the event, you can see that pretty clearly. Um, Illustrations, if you've never been to one, from the time they start to the time they end, are a constant motion, um, constant activities. Even when nothing is happening, things are happening because everyone is taking advantage of this time um, to see people they only see at lustrations or maybe have never seen before. Some people make an effort to come to every lustration of the ancestors, and they will see the people they know so well online in person that one time a year. Other people are only able to come once or maybe to a couple of lustrations. So they're seeing the people they know so well online, maybe for the only time they'll see each other in person. Um, for many people, it's certainly the first time they've seen each other in person, and there is just something wonderful about that. And um, we had people come to this lustration who have been with this tradition for 20 and 30 years, but had not come to any recent lustrations for various reasons. One of them being my nephew Zach, who came down from Chicago, and he got to meet his clergy mentor, Reverend Deb McGinley, who has been his mentor since 2003, I think it was. But they had never been able to meet in person because he was from Chicago, she is from Buffalo, New York. They finally met in person. Zach has not been at illustration for many years because for at least a decade he was living in the United Kingdom, but he is now back in the U.S. and becoming re-involved in the tradition, which we are all very happy for. Um, Maggie de la Yata, who has been part of this tradition for 30 years. Certainly not her first lustration, but so nice to have her come down. Renee Bauta, who's been associated with us for 30 years. Wonderful to have her come out. Wonderful to see so many people. Um, I could never mention everyone, particularly until I've rested a little longer. But it was so great to see everyone, and I have to say, people had such wonderful things to say about me that it, in fact, became quite emotional in places. Um, One of the things that I've talked about a lot during the last year is reflecting on my life and did I do the right things? Was it worth the doing? And yet there were times last year when I had to look at it and say, what on what did I do all of this for? It was like the whole world at certain times seemed to have become quite hostile. But that was only certain people who had their own reasons for being hostile and things they wanted to gain, which they did not gain. But at this point, have to say it was very worth the time, very worth the effort, very worth the sacrifices that were made over these 45 years because I've been very clearly shown the influence that I have had on people's lives for the better. including in some cases influences I had no idea that I was contributing to. Um, and attending your own funeral, so to speak, is always a very interesting thing, and even better when you're not dead. Um, but people got to say things to me that usually only get said when someone has died, and it was very gratifying to receive that. And I want to thank everyone. Um, it was a beautiful time. And if you were watching the live streams, you saw how beautiful the rituals were. You got to see our interviews with many of the people who were in attendance. Um, and it was so good. Well, I mentioned Reverend Antonio earlier. This was his first lustration. He has been with us for a very long time, but to actually get to meet him in person was wonderful. And to meet Vicky was wonderful. Um, got to meet Dee Dee Stinson, which was wonderful. So many people who were attending their first lustration we got to meet for the first time. Others who um, we got to see again for the first time. In many cases, since the COVID pandemic, and it was really wonderful to have our family come back together this way. We often talk about the Karelian tradition, um, which began as a familial tradition, as still being a family. And that's very much the energy. And like all families, we have our occasional disagreements and arguments, but we're still there. And that to me is a wonderful thing. So I could not have been happier with this weekend. I hope that you enjoyed our coverage of it. The next lustration of the ancestors is going to be in New Orleans next spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. And I'm imagining we'll be covering that. And I think that will be a remarkable thing. We've never had a lustration in New Orleans, though we had planned one, but the pandemic prevented that from occurring. And I am certainly looking forward to it. I have personally never been to New Orleans before, and am quite looking forward to that experience, both for the food and for the metaphysics. I, if you're not familiar with my food tastes, I like highly layered foods where there are many flavors involved, and I like spicy foods, hot or not hot, but I like that feeling that a lot has gone into it, and I believe that's very much something that New Orleans is known for. And I'm quite interested in that portion of that presentation. And so a year from now, I hope that you will join us for Lustration in New Orleans, or Norlands, as I believe it is commonly pronounced. And Janet Winston in the chat room says, "Thank you for sharing all of this through technology." Thank you, Janet, for enjoying it. And this is why we started doing video all those years ago. And this is the 19th year for Karelian TV/Magic TV, about soon to be our 20th. And although we were already doing video before that, um, that started our ability to reach larger audiences. And it was always with this intention of helping people who, for geographical reasons or social reasons or whatever reasons, could not get out to connect with the real-time live community in their everyday life. We wanted to give them a way to do this, whether they were geographically isolated, whether they were perhaps disabled, whether they were simply afraid of making new connections, to show them and to share with them this wonderful community, to help them become part of it, even if physically they were not able to do so, to build connections, and to give a vicarious sense of what coming to an event like this is like. I've talked before about how so many people, when they're asked what their advice for new people coming to the pagan or metaphysical community is, it's read everything you can find. That is not my advice. My advice is to connect with the people, to go out and see what's actually here, to see what you like. And today you can do that. Um, you can see the different kinds of movements that are present. You can see the different people and get a real feel for them. And then go read whatever you want to read. But the problem is that, often to read it without experiencing it is simply not complete. And I think that when you can have the experience of seeing people, of hearing people speak in their own words, of attending events, whether through technology or in person, it will tell you more than any book is ever going to tell you about what you're really dealing with and do you really want to deal with it. And then you can get all of the finer points by reading. One of the problems with so many of the books out there is that so many writers have presumed to write as though their path were the only path. Their way was the only way. Their tradition was the only tradition. And if you have read that and start with that point of view, you're going to be very surprised by the real community. They'll tell you there's only one way of doing things right, and you won't see it anywhere in the community because it's simply not true. Um, See the community first, and we are here to help you do that. And for 18 years, we did it as Magic TV. Now we do it as Corellian TV. And we're going to be here for another 18 years and maybe longer than that. We'll certainly be here as long as I'm alive to do it. But, at this point, I'm quite confident we'll be here even when I have moved on to spirit. And we have lots of new things coming for you. One of the new programs that is planned, because, for me, the next thing in my life is Gaia Thrift. And we'll be talking a lot more about Gaia Thrift in the future. And I will show you our adorable alicorn logo in the future. Um, but this is basically, on one level, a thrift store, but on the other level, it's an ecological project. It is um, an upcycling, recycling project. It's very much about nature and ecology and doing the right thing for our world, which might not be immediately apparent, but it is. But part of this is going to be a new program, um, which is called something along the lines of Reverend Don's Closet. We haven't finalized exactly the name, but it's Don's Closet, and it will be me talking about fashion, things that we will have at the store, but also things in my personal collection, how I like to put things together, how you can learn to put things together um, in ways you might not have thought of. Because if you can't tell, I tend to think outside the box a little bit. And I love my fashion. So I think this will be a fun program coming in the relatively near future. And I sometimes talk about how I follow a lot of channels on Instagram, and some of them are just fashion channels. And I find it quite fascinating to see different people's takes. A lot of the vintage fashion channels, a lot of just people's uh, personal fashion sense. And so doing a little of that myself, I think, is going to be interesting. And as you know, I do have a very particular style. So that's one of the things coming in future to Corellian TV. But the other thing that will continue coming are programs of interest to the pagan and metaphysical community and coverage of events of interest to the pagan and metaphysical community. We cannot attend all of them, obviously, and um, We would love to attend all of them. And if anyone is interested in being a distance reporter with us, give us a contact because we would love to have more people involved in this project, um, to bring more coverage of more events from across the country. And we have worked on this. We have had this happen on a number of occasions in the past, and we would like to rev it up again for the future. So again, much more coming, many wonderful things coming, and I think for me that is the final outtake of this weekend. That, on one hand, this lustration marked a change in administration in the Corellian tradition, uh, and yet it also is a continuation. And that continuation, that going forward, to me, is the strong energy that we are dealing with. I will have to say, we tried to be on time. We really did. Um, and not everything was, which if you were following the live streams, I'm sure you're aware. But just as I was um, thinking of this, it was pointed out to me, well, why would it be different? It was always this way. The old administration and the new administration have made a perfect turnover, and all of the same things are still in place. And Janet in the chat room says, hopefully Mike and I will be able to attend the next one. That would be wonderful, Janet. We would love to have you come. Another person who is present at this lustration, Susan Dancing Star, had her first degree initiatory confirmation. Susan has been with us. Well, she's known us for 30 years. She's joined the tradition quite recently. Um, and Janet asks, will you ever have a living photo album? What does that mean, Janet? I'm not entirely familiar with that term. We will be, well, actually, I can answer it even without knowing. We will look into it now, and yes, we almost certainly will, because it sounds fun. Um, I'll just have to find out exactly what a living photo album is. In my excuse, I'm old. But our younger people, I'm sure, already know this term. And we will start working on that because that sounds fascinating. And we have we actually have a lot of interesting technical projects in store for the future also. Um, but I'm going to hold off on mentioning those until we're closer. But everything is moving forward, everything is moving up. And I hope that you'll stay with us for this journey as it continues. And I love spending this time of day with you. I love getting to talk to you. Oh, and Jenna says pictures of the past, present, and future. Yes, I'm sure we can do that. And if you want to see lots of photos um, of Corellian tradition history, go to Corellian.com. Go to the adventure page, which goes back to our first public lustration back in 2002. And before that, we were not taking as many photos as we take now. One of the things that started us taking so many photos and so much video, I'm sure you've all heard the old saying, photos or it didn't happen. There were a lot of people who didn't believe things that I or we had done because they weren't photographed everywhere. And we said to ourselves, well, we're just going to make sure you know what we do from now on. And ever since then, the photo op has been part of every Corellian experience. And everything we do has photo after photo after photo and video after video where possible. So yeah, go have a look at that as a beginning. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be doing more of that. Absolutely. We we also have a large store of photographs from before 2002 that have, in some cases, never gotten online. In some cases, they've been online, but on previous sites that aren't standing now. And eventually, we're going to get all of those up. We have been, one of our great goals has always been to be chroniclers and archivists of the pagan movement insofar as we can. One of the things that I will always remember was Victoria Carlson, wonderful woman, one of the great high priestesses of Chicago, honorary Corellian high priestess, wonderful friend, now in spirit many, many years. But she remarked on how during the 70s, there had been a person in Chicago who photographed everything. And there were so many photos of rituals and the priesthood and their regalia and events that occurred. And one day he was no longer there. And no one ever knew what happened to him, although presumably he passed into spirit, or what happened to those photos, which presumably are gone forever. Our goal is to make sure that the things we have chronicled are never gone. One way or another, we are going to make sure they always remain. One of the worst things I have seen in our community, and I see it again and again and again, and I see it even still now, is a generational disconnect. The new generations coming in are not well connected to the old generations and don't really understand the things that happened, which could be useful to them to understand. Therefore, they keep repeating the same mistakes. One of my great goals now is the autobiography. I can't tell you how long it's going to take. I can't tell you when it's coming, but we're going to be working on it, at least one. Um, and what I want to do with that is not just talk about what happened, but what was learned from what happened. And, I am quite certain, if you're watching this from Chicago today, you probably don't remember that 20 to 30 years ago, there were events in Chicago drawing thousands of attendants. Witches' balls that topped out over 1,000 people. The pagan expos that I believe topped 2,000 people. Um, Numerous open public temples doing things every Sabbat. Numerous magazines. How that happened and why so much of it is no longer there, I think need to be passed on to the next generation so that they don't make the mistakes of the old generation. Or if they do, at least they'll know they're doing it. And things like the Chicago Pagan Leadership Conferences, why it was such a great success when it began, and why it eventually um, took the wrong turn in becoming an organization rather than an event, and why that was the wrong turn. All of these things are part of the knowledge that we need to preserve, that we want to preserve, and that's why we're doing this. And, I have heard them make the ridiculous suggestion that it was all done for profit, and all I can say is, where the fuck was the profit? I'm living in my nephew's spare room. Thank you. There was never that kind of money in this. We did this out of love and duty. And I think, again, it was worth the doing. And as we go forward, there's a lot more to be done. And I, for one, will continue doing it. And again, the next big thing is Gaia Thrift, which will be both in person and online. And we are hoping that it will actually be a significant move ecologically, not just in itself, but hopefully where it leads. So continue watching Midday with Rev Don for more information on that and all these things. And I want to thank you for joining me today. I've gone a little over my half hour, but I do that sometimes. And I'll be back tomorrow with Chris Copeland to talk about the new things from Corellian Publishing. And there is a new thing. And I'll be a little more rested tomorrow and a little more rested the day after. But regardless of how rested I am or am not, I love spending this time with you. Thank you again for joining me, and let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives. And we thank you for the fact that the future is always there. We thank you for the fact that even those things that seem like they were mistakes or wrong turns so often turn out to be needed later, to be the information we needed later, to be the training we needed later. We thank you for the beautiful complexity of life. And we ask you to help us to always be mindful of that and to always look at life with the wonder of a child and hope for the future. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love. And knowing you are always with us from respect, we thank you for your presence. May you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And